The moment the HOA president jabbed her finger toward the lake and shouted that it belonged to them, I felt a calm, dangerous confidence settle in my chest. They had no idea what they were stepping into. Because while they believed they were standing on community property, every wooden plank beneath their feet actually told a very different story, one I had been preparing for months. For weeks, they had marched around the shoreline with clipboards, tape measures, and smug expressions, convinced they were building a case to force me to hand over what they called association assets. They snapped photos of ripples, counted ducks, even tried to find me when a leaf blew off a nearby tree. But arrogance makes people sloppy, and they never once thought to check the true ownership records. It all started months earlier when I noticed unusual activity on the community forum, cryptic hints that the HOA board plans something big involving the lake. Most residents ignored it, but I recognized the pattern. This wasn't maintenance or policy. This was a power grab. And every power grab begins with one dangerous assumption, that nobody will push back with facts powerful enough to shatter their illusion of control. So I quietly began gathering documents, old land surveys, county filings, private agreements signed long before the HOA even existed. The deeper I dug, the more stunning the truth became. Not only did the lake itself predate the community boundaries, but the docks had been individually deeded and sold as private structures. And one by one, through patience and opportunity, I had acquired every single one. But I didn't reveal any of it. Not yet. Instead, I watched them bluff and posture, issuing threats they believed I was too intimidated to challenge. They strutted across the docks like conquerors, pointing out imaginary violations, whispering about upcoming board votes and mandatory compliance. I let them believe every bit of it, because the moment they overplayed their hand was the moment my evidence would hit like a wrecking ball. That moment arrived on a bright Saturday morning, when the entire board marched onto my property armed with a printed cease and desist letter and the kind of confidence only ignorance can produce. Neighbors gathered, curious and uneasy. The board claimed authority. I let them talk. Then, with every eye watching, I reached into my folder and prepared to flip their world upside down. What they didn't know was that the paperwork I held wasn't speculation, opinion, or some desperate counterargument. It was irrefutable, legally stamped proof tying every dock to my name alone. And as the wind rustled across the water, I realized the moment had come to expose everything they had tried so hard to claim as theirs, right that day. The HOA president's confidence evaporated the moment I pulled out the thick, tab-separated folder. She tried to keep her expression neutral, but the quiver in her jaw betrayed her. The other board members glanced at each other, suddenly unsure if the ground beneath them quite literally was as secure as they had believed. I didn't rush. I let the silence build. Tension is a powerful thing, and right then, the entire lakeside vibrated with it. Before you continue threatening me, I said calmly, you should know exactly where you're standing. I handed the president a laminated document, an official land grant from decades earlier, signed long before the HOA existed. She scanned it, her face shifting from confusion to irritation to something dangerously close to fear. This can't be right, she muttered. Oh, it's very right, I replied. And that's only page 1. Behind her, a few neighbors leaned closer, curious. The treasurer adjusted his glasses. The secretary, who loved to send snarky complaint emails at 2 a.m., suddenly looked like she wanted to fold into her clipboard and disappear. I continued, methodically laying out every document on the railing of Dock 3, the dock they claimed needed to be removed immediately for non-compliance. First came the original dock deed. Then the transfer paperwork showing it was sold before the HOA's founding. Then the confirmation that it was explicitly exempt from future association jurisdiction. And finally, the signature page bearing my name. That alone would have been enough. But it was only the beginning. One by one, I pulled out more folders. Dock 2. Dock 4. Dock 7. Dock 11. Their eyes widened with each reveal. I didn't raise my voice or boast. I simply placed the documents in front of them with the quiet confidence of someone who had already won long before the battle even started. The HOA president tried to intercept the situation. "This lake is community property," she barked, waving her hands like she could scare the truth away. "The water, yes," I replied. "But everything built on it? Not even close." I pointed beneath their feet. "You're standing on private property." "My property?" A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. A few neighbors looked stunned. Others looked entertained. Even a couple of the board members stepped off the dock, suddenly nervous about trespassing. But the president refused to give up. "We will challenge this," she snapped. I smiled. "You can try. But I've already filed copies with the county this week. Go ahead and fight the paperwork if you want, but the law has already picked its winner." That was the moment their entire campaign began to crumble. The HOA president's defiance cracked, but it didn't shatter, not yet. She wasn't the type to back down gracefully, she was the type who doubled down even when the cliff edge was already crumbling beneath her. So, of course, she puffed up her shoulders, stepped forward, and tried to reclaim her authority like it hadn't just been publicly ripped from her grasp. "We'll take this to the board," she declared, as if her committee of self-appointed enforcers carried more weight than county-sealed legal records. "Great," I replied. "Make sure you bring a calculator, too. You'll need it when you see how much back rent your board owes for using my docks during community events." That single sentence detonated across the crowd. The treasurer actually choked. The secretary froze mid-scribble. Neighbors gasped so loudly you could have mistaken it for a gust of wind. The president's face drained of color. She knew I wasn't bluffing. The HOA had hosted fishing events, barbecues, summer gatherings, meetings, always using the docks as their center stage. They had strutted across them like kings, never realizing they were technically trespassing every single time. I opened another folder. Here are the invoices. I took the liberty of itemizing 5 years' worth of unauthorized HOA usage. And before you argue, yes, I confirmed with the county that I am entitled to seek compensation retroactively. The treasurer leaned over, scanning the papers with trembling hands. This is thousands of dollars," he whispered. "More," I corrected. "Tens of thousands." A stunned silence settled. Some neighbors tried to hide their amusement. Others didn't bother. Meanwhile, the president sputtered. You can't seriously expect us to pay that. You seriously expected me to hand over my lake access?" I countered. For the first time, I saw something unfamiliar in her expression: uncertainty. The kind that weakens the spine of self-proclaimed tyrants. Before she could recover, a neighbor stepped forward, a quiet older man who rarely spoke at meetings. "He's right," he said. "If what he's shown is accurate, the HOA has massively overstepped." Another neighbor jumped in. "Honestly, we're tired of the board bullying people. You finally picked the wrong one." The president spun toward them. "You're turning on us." "No," the older man replied. "You turned on us a long time ago." It was subtle, but the shift was unmistakable. The crowd wasn't with her anymore. The board stood silently, no longer defending her. And for the first time since she'd taken power, the president realized she stood entirely alone. That was when she made her biggest mistake yet, a desperate, reckless move that would. The HOA president, cornered and desperate, did what every power-drunk bully does when the truth exposes their house of cards. She tried to rewrite reality on the spot. "This entire display is fabricated," she shouted, waving her hands wildly. "These documents are fake. He's trying to scam the association. I demand the sheriff come out here immediately." Ah! There it was. Her last card. When logic failed, she reached for intimidation. But I had prepared for this too. "Perfect," I said calmly. "Because I already called them. Right on cue, two sheriff's deputies walked around the curve of the shoreline. They'd been waiting in their patrol car down the road at my request, ready to intervene only when necessary. Now, watching the scene unfold, they approached with steady steps and a look that said they'd seen this kind of meltdown many times before. The president spun toward them like they were her personal cavalry. "Officer! Arrest him! He's forging documents and threatening the HOA." One deputy raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, we're here because Mr. requested verification assistance regarding a property dispute. He provided the county with advanced documentation. We're here to confirm what's already been reviewed." Her mouth fell open. "You're on his side." "We're on the side of the law," the deputy corrected. I handed the officers the neatly organized folder, the same one I had shown the HOA. They flipped through it with the professionalism of men who could spot a fake signature from 20 feet away. After just a minute of reviewing, the second deputy nodded. "These are legitimate. Fully recorded. Fully binding." A wave of murmurs swept through the gathered neighbors. The treasurer looked like he might faint. The secretary quietly closed her clipboard and stepped backward, slowly, like she was distancing herself from a sinking ship. The deputy turned toward the president. "Ma'am, I'm going to give you a clear warning. Continuing to interfere with private property rights, issuing falsified HOA claims, or attempting to coerce residents into surrendering deeded property could result in civil or potentially criminal consequences." Her face went slack. Colorless. Speechless for the first time since she'd taken the role. And then, in front of the entire neighborhood, she did the only thing left: she retreated. No grand exit, no dramatic argument. She simply turned and walked away fast while the rest of the board scrambled to follow. The crowd stayed silent, until the door of her house slammed shut. Then the cheers began. Neighbors clapped me on the back. Some apologized for not stepping in sooner. Others asked how in the world I had outsmarted a board known for steamrolling everyone. I just smiled. "I didn't outsmart them," I said. "I just prepared for the day they tried to take what wasn't theirs." The lake shimmered behind me. My docks. My property. Finally, undisputed. Script complete. "Let me know if you want edits or a new version," you said. Chapter 5 continue. ChatGPT said. Chapter 5 460 words. For a few days after the showdown, the neighborhood felt strangely peaceful, almost too peaceful. No surprise inspections. No threatening letters tucked into mailboxes. No board members prowling around with clipboards like vultures circling a carcass. The silence was refreshing, but also suspicious. Because people like the former HOA president don't simply disappear. They regroup. They plot. They nurse their pride until it swells into something reckless. And sure enough, trouble resurfaced quietly at first. It began with whispers. Neighbors mentioned seeing the president meeting with someone in a black SUV late at night. Others said a stack of unfamiliar papers had been delivered to her porch. The treasurer claimed he'd been pressured to reconsider his loyalty. Even the secretary admitted she'd received a late-night phone call telling her to stay on the right side of things. Clearly, the dethroned queen wasn't finished. So I kept watch. I didn't snoop around, I didn't need to. When people feel power slipping away, they often reveal their next move without realizing it. And one evening, as the sun dipped behind the lake, I heard the telltale sound of footsteps on Dock 7, hesitant, unsteady, as if the person knew they shouldn't be there. I stepped outside quietly. There she was. The former HOA president, standing alone at the edge of the dock, staring out at the water like she was wrestling with a storm inside her. No entourage. No board members. No clipboard. Just a woman whose world had shrunk faster than she could process. "I figured you'd show up again," I said. She flinched but didn't turn around. "I didn't come to fight. That'd be a first." She let out a shaky breath and finally faced me. The fire in her eyes was gone, replaced by exhaustion, frustration, and a hint of something I never expected to see from her: humility. "You embarrassed me," she muttered. "You embarrassed yourself," I corrected. "I just exposed what you were hiding." She didn't argue. Not this time. After a long pause, she spoke again. "I thought controlling the lake would make everyone respect me. Make them see I was protecting the community." "Protecting?" I raised an eyebrow. "You were trying to control what wasn't yours." She looked down at the dock beneath her feet. "I know." The silence between us grew heavy. The wind schemed across the water, rippling the reflections of the fading sky. For the first time, she looked genuinely small, just another resident who'd lost herself in power. Finally, she sighed. "I'm stepping down. For real this time. The board can elect someone else. Someone better." "That'll be good for everyone," I said. She nodded once, then walked off the dock, slow, unsteady, but without the arrogance she once carried like armor. As her footsteps faded, the lake felt calm in a new way, settled, restored. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like the community could breathe again. "Let me know if you want Chapter 6." The others nodded. Hands clasped. Posture respectful. A complete contrast to the arrogance I'd dealt with before. "We want to rebuild trust," she continued. "And before we make any new decisions, we need to understand exactly where the boundaries are, literally and legally." I led them down to the lake, not as adversaries but as neighbors. Together, we walked the shoreline, moving from dock to dock. I explained the history, the paperwork, the boundaries, the exemptions. And for the first time ever, they listened. No interruptions. No accusations. No power plays. Just genuine understanding. "You've taken care of this place better than the HOA ever did," one man admitted. "Maybe, we should have been learning from you instead of fighting you." That struck deeper than I expected. For years, the HOA's loudest voices had been the wrong voices, bullies cloaked in authority. But now the community was slowly shifting towards something healthier, something cooperative. And I realized the victory wasn't just in proving ownership. It was in changing the tone of the entire neighborhood. Of course, not everyone accepted the new order. The former president avoided everyone, staying inside like she feared stepping onto a street she no longer controlled. The board members who supported her vanished from meetings. Whispers spread of audits, violations, potential fines, and possibly even legal repercussions. But that was no longer my battle to fight. As the sun set over the lake that evening, its reflection calm and golden, I understood something important. Winning isn't always about proving others wrong. Sometimes, it's about making things right. In the days following the HOA president's collapse, the neighborhood shifted in ways none of us could have predicted. What began as quiet murmurs soon transformed into bold conversations in driveways, evening gatherings on porches, and long overdue questions whispered across fences. It was as if the whole community had woken from a fog they never realized they were living in. The former president had vanished from public view. Curtains drawn. No emails. No surprise inspections. No threats disguised as reminders. For the first time in years, the neighborhood breathed freely. But peace wasn't the only thing rising. Something else simmered beneath the surface: accountability. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, but unlike their usual closed-door power sessions, this one was open to every resident. Chairs filled quickly, people spilling into the back of the clubhouse. I sat near the front, not because I wanted attention, but because I wanted clarity. The community deserved it. The treasurer, normally a man of stiff posture and clipped words, cleared his throat and addressed the room. "We owe everyone here an apology," he began. "The board acted on assumptions and misinformation. We let one person's ambition override our responsibility to the neighborhood. That alone shocked half the room. But what he said next hit harder. And after reviewing the documentation provided, everything Mr. presented is legitimate. Every doc. Every exemption. Every clause our president attempted to suppress. A wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd. Some people nodded firmly. Others glared at the empty seat where the former president once held court. The secretary stood next. We failed to question her decisions. We failed you. But we're done failing. She lifted a stack of papers. We're proposing a full audit of all HOA procedures, fines, and decisions over the last 7 years. If anyone has been wrongly charged or harassed, we will correct it. That announcement sparked applause, real, genuine applause. For once, the board wasn't hiding behind technicalities or lecturing the residents like unruly children. They were listening. They were acting. When the floor opened for comments, neighbors who had once whispered now spoke boldly. Stories poured out, threats, unfair notices, fines for non-existent violations. It was astonishing how much had been quietly tolerated. Finally, someone asked me directly, "So what will you do now? After everything?" I stood, feeling the weight of many eyes but not the pressure. "I'm not here to take revenge," I said. "All I ever wanted was for the HOA to treat people fairly. The docs were never about power. They were about principle. If this board is ready to rebuild trust, I'm willing to help." That answer earned more support than I expected. In that moment, the room wasn't divided by fear or authority, it was united by possibility. A new chapter for the neighborhood had just begun. In the weeks that followed the HOA's collapse, the neighborhood transformed in ways none of us expected. Without the president's relentless demands and her board's heavy-handed threats, the lake slowly shifted from being a battlefield to becoming what it was always meant to be, a place of peace. But beneath that calm surface, a new question began rising among the residents: what happens now? Because the truth was, once the HOA president was removed and the board resigned in a wave of embarrassment, the entire community structure was left in limbo. Some feared chaos. Others feared someone even worse might try to seize control next. And a few, surprisingly, came to me quietly, cautiously, to ask if I would consider taking a leadership role. I laughed the idea off at first. Me? Run an HOA? That was like asking a firefighter to run the arson club. But the more people approached me, the more I realized their concern wasn't about rules or power, it was about safety. They were afraid of being bullied again, afraid of losing their property rights, afraid of another tyrant using a title as a weapon. So, reluctantly, I agreed to attend an interim community meeting, not as a candidate, but as someone who could help reorganize things so no one person could ever wield that kind of authority again. The meeting was held near sunset, right by the lake. Nearly everyone showed up. Some sat in lawn chairs, some stood at the water's edge, and some brought notebooks filled with questions. But before the conversation even began, something unexpected happened. The quiet older man, the same one who had defended me during the confrontation, stepped forward with a proposal. Instead of putting all the power into one board, he said, "Why not split responsibilities among rotating resident committees? No permanent seats. No lifetime positions. No unchecked authority." The idea spread through the crowd like a fresh breeze. Heads nodded. People murmured in agreement. Even those who had once feared change looked relieved. Someone asked, "What about enforcement? Complaints? Fines?" He smiled. "If neighbors talk to each other instead of threatening each other, you won't need fines." For the first time in a long time, the neighborhood felt human again. A vote was held. The committees were formed. The new system passed unanimously. And just like that, the era of fear officially ended. As the meeting wrapped up, people thanked me not for winning, but for standing up, for digging into the truth, for not folding under pressure when so many others had. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like someone who had simply defended what was rightfully his. I turned toward the lake. The docks glowed under the orange light of sunset. Mine. Still mine. Always mine. And now, for the first time ever, the whole community finally understood why that mattered. Confirm if you want Chapter 9. You said. Continue Chapter 9. ChatGPT said. Chapter 9 460 words. The neighborhood had changed in the weeks following the HOA's collapse, but the ripples of that day continued spreading far wider than anyone expected. Almost overnight, the community shifted from a place ruled by intimidation to one powered by quiet relief and a surprising amount of curiosity. People who had never spoken more than a polite hello suddenly wanted to talk, to ask questions, to understand how the truth about the docks had remained hidden for so long. But the real storm was brewing inside the now leaderless HOA board. After the president's meltdown at the lake, 3 board members resigned within 48 hours. The treasurer sent out a shaky, poorly formatted email announcing he was stepping back for personal reasons. The secretary vanished entirely, no longer appearing at meetings or even responding to messages. The vice president attempted to take charge, but without the force of the old president behind him, his authority held all the power of a soggy napkin. The community demanded transparency. And transparency is kryptonite to any crooked organization. A special assembly was called, one that quickly turned into the most crowded gathering the HOA had ever seen. Every chair was filled. People lined the walls. Even residents who usually avoided neighborhood dramas showed up just to witness what they hoped would be the final unraveling of the board's power. I didn't intend to speak that night. I truly didn't. But the moment the vice president tried to declare that the lake situation was a misunderstanding, exaggerated by misinformation, the entire room erupted. That wasn't misinformation, someone shouted. He showed proof, another said. You all tried to take what wasn't yours, a woman near the back added. The vice president stammered, holding up his hands as if he could press the noise back into silence. We only acted under the belief that your authority was limitless. I interrupted. The room went quiet. Hundreds of eyes turned toward me. I rose slowly. Let's be clear, this wasn't an accident. The president knew she didn't have jurisdiction. She just didn't think anyone would challenge her. And from what I've seen in old minutes and emails, this wasn't the first time the board tried to stretch its power, just the first time someone stopped them. Whispers spread like smoke. So what do you suggest? A neighbor asked. I let my gaze sweep across the room. Rebuild. Replace the board. Put people in charge who understand that homeowners are neighbors, not subjects. And create rules that protect, not punish. For the first time, the room wasn't divided. It was united. And it was that unity that set the stage for the next, most unexpected chapter of the